the case in what I'm going to show you today in the version 5.4.4, which is the one in production, which is the one that you should be using it if you are using the converter today. So my name is Fernando Morente. Yes, I'm using, as I mentioned, Veronique's account, who is the project leader for all training courses provided within B5. Yes, some of you might recognize me. I run different training courses on the SDMX registry or the ESSM Mage, which is a tool for the compilation and process of metadata, as well as edit, which is for data validation. Without further ado, well, this is the outline of what we are going to accomplish today. So the organizing of this webinar is Eurostat, to be more precise, Unit B5. The topic is the SDMX converter. Forcing the duration of the course might be between 1 and 2 hours. So let's say 1.5 hours. If there's something unclear, I have muted you in principle to make sure there is no background noise that sometimes interferes with the quality of the sound. But you are very welcome to use the chat box that I was using, and some of you also use, to write any question, something that it might not be clear throughout the presentation. You do not have to wait until the last minute. Just if something is unclear while I'm going through the presentation, please write it down, send it to me, and I will get back to it at the end of the presentation. So after the presentation, you will receive a link which will direct you to EU survey for you to evaluate or to provide feedback. The training materials, meaning this session is being recorded, so the recording of this session as well as the presentation and those questions that you might have, if there are any, will be all uploaded on CircaVC, and they will be accessible as of late this week or beginning of next week. Objectives. Well, we are gonna, by the end of this presentation, we will be able to have an overall understanding of what the SDMX converter does and how to use it. So target audience, we say here that there is no prior knowledge, so there is no a prerequisite, and it should be people that are interested in SDMX to start with, and of course, if they are involved in the data transmission, all the best. So this is a small overview of what we're going to be looking at. So generally, SDMX, what is SDMX, how to install the SDMX converter, how to use the converter, and then the last part of today's presentation will be a few hands-on examples. So I will convert some files live for you to see. These files will be shared with you on CircaVC, so you can replicate what we're doing today. So without further ado, and let's go on to what is SDMX. So SDMX stands for Statistical Data and Metadata Exchange. It's an initiative that started back in 2001. At the time, 6 organizations, all by the UN Statistical Division, were part. They signed, or they decided to unite forces in order to facilitate the exchange of data and metadata. Firstly, of course, they look at themselves in order to serve their needs, and now, well, as the time passes on, we've been trying to also serve the needs of national, not only the stakeholders as in like us, so international organization to international organization, but of course from the stakeholders of each of these international organizations to between them. So meaning, of course, in Eurostat, we are talking about member states and those other countries that are providing data to Eurostat. So from 2007, there was a memorandum of understanding that was signed by then already the 7 international organizations that are called the sponsor organization. So those are, as you see on this image, the Bank for International Settlement, Eurostat, the European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund, UNSD, a statistical division, World Bank, and the OECD. So those are the 7 international organizations, or so-called the SDMX sponsors. There is an image that I haven't included in the presentation, but the way it works, or how the initiative works, is the decision making is being split into 3 levels. So we have the working groups, the statistical and technical working groups. Each of them, they're tasked with different tasks. They are tasked with different areas. So while the statistical working group is in charge of creating, updating guidelines, including the SDMX glossary, which was recently updated, and I will mention it again today. The TWG, or the Technical Working Group, is tasked with the development of the standard and the bug fixings, for instance. So on the top of these, or above these, we have the Secretariat, the SDMS Secretariat, which is comprises at least one representative from all these 7 international organizations, and they do the they are the middle decision taking body, and the CEO, they meet once every month, whereas the highest decision making body is the SDMX Sponsors Committee, which usually roughly meets once every 3 months, so once a quarter, and they provide overarching guidelines how to push forward on SDMX. So that is about SDMX as in terms of the initiative, how it operates, and what are the institutions that sponsor the SDMX standard. In terms of what the SDMX standard does, or the main components, we usually talk about 3 pillars: the SDMX information model, the content-oriented guidelines, and the IT infrastructure. So the SDMX information model, there are currently 17 different artifacts. So it describes the relation among these artifacts. The one is the theoretical part of the standard that describes or models the data. So it's here we have one of the main artifacts, of course, is the data structure definition, which models the data that is going to be transmitted between different organizations. Also, we have another artifact, which is very common, of course, called list, concept schemes. All of these and their relation are defined in the SDMX information model. The content-oriented guidelines, all the work that is done under this pillar belongs or is tasked to the statistical working groups. So they are the ones in charge of creating or updating new guidelines. So there are guidelines for how to, for code lists. In fact, so SDMX, they have a specific code list, and those should be used if you are implementing SDMX. So the ones that I have come up with the specific code list, like for frequency, that is the statistical working group, which comprises 20 representatives from national and international organizations. And the SDMX guidelines, the newest SDMX guidelines is actually the glossary, the SDMX glossary, that it was updated. The version 2 was recently updated and published. It was last month only, October 2018. So there you find more than 200 common concepts that are used, and the definition. So the definition, if you find that concept being used for an SDMX implementer, it means that the definition will be exactly the same that is being described on this document. This document is very important when we talk about metadata because, for instance, the SDMX implementation we do here in Eurostat, we take our structures are based or take the concepts that are defined and available in the SDMX glossary. So those are different examples of what are included within the SDMX content-oriented guidelines. Of course, we need, as well as the concept and the definition agreed, harmonized concept and the definitions, and including code lists, and the relationship between all the different components that enable the exchange of data metadata, which are described in the information model. We need the NIT infrastructure. So we have three different ways that we understand we see data or metadata being exchanged. That is push, so where the sender pushes, presses a button, and it sends the data to the receiver. The pull, where the pull, so the receiver is the one pulling the data from the, well, in this case it's not sender, from the provider. And the hub, which is a specific case of pulling right at the end of the line by the user. So the user would be, there would be, well, the data bases would be interconnected, and the last user or the user could, in principle, pull the data from those interconnected databases. So a specific case of the pull version. So SDMX converter, which is the tool we are targeting today, falls within the push mode. Of course, so we've said that we need agreed definitions that are included in the, well, some of them they are in the SDMX glossary, but in any case, they're all being pushed by or developed by the statistical working group. But we need tools as well that provide or enable this exchange of data and metadata. So we, as Eurostat, as one of the sponsor organizations, we have developed different tools for that exchange, to enable that exchange, as I said, data and metadata. And the way we group those tools that have been developed by us, they are open source. Those are the SDMX registry and data structure wizard, the SDMX reference infrastructure, and the SDMX converter. There are others, like I said, the SDMH, which is the implementation of metadata, SDMX metadata by Eurostat. But for us, in terms of well, today's focus, we are going to focus on these tools, and we are grouping them in terms of whether our role is of a data collector or a data provider. If we are a data collector, we will be using the SDMX registry. If we and the data structure wizard, although in the SDMX registry we can already create DSDs, which is the main functionality of the DSW. For data providers, such as you, or most of you, you might be using SDMX registry in order to access the specific artifact. So, for instance, a DSD. And then you will be posed the question whether to use the reference infrastructure, meaning opening up your, setting up your database in a way that it can be sent or it can be pulled by, in this case, Eurostat automatically with the web service, or you might do it manually with the SDMX converter. So I think this, well, again, so if we are data collector, data structure wizard, which allow me to, or allow users to create, edit, and test SDMX objects, like the DSD. This is now being overtaken partially by the SDMX registry, because in the SDMX registry, we can also create, edit, and test new SDMX artifacts. So that would be, in principle, if you are using the DSW or data structure wizard, you will create or edit or test your new artifact, your SDMX artifact, whether it's a concept, a scheme, whether it's a code list, whether it's a DSD, whether it's an MSD, you will be using that. Then you will be storing the new artifacts on the SDMX registry. So for in Eurostat, we have the Euro SDMX registry, but there are other registries out there, or SDMX registries out there, like the global registry, which is the one. Of course, they serve different purposes. In the Euro SDMX registry, you will find all the components, all the artifacts that are important or needed for our stakeholders in order to transmit or to exchange data and metadata. Whether it's in the global registry, you will find artifacts that are important to the global community. So for instance, global DSDs, they will be stored in the global registry. It is true, however, in case someone wonders, that with or if we access the Euro SDMX registry, there is a link or like a box we can tick, which will enable us to call other registries, such as the global SDMX registry. So it is true that we will have access, but the main recipient of those global artifacts, in this case the global DSD, would be the global registry. And then users, in case of the European stakeholders, so Eurostat stakeholders, they will be calling, of course, or going to the Euro SDMX registry. In case of the global community, they will be, of course, going to the global SDMX registry. For data providers, so this is a link with what we just said. So the collector has provided a new set or a new artifact, we say a new DSD, which has been stored on the SDMX registry. In our case, the Euro SDMX registry for Eurostat stakeholders. So for data providers, we will go to this Euro SDMX registry, and then in order to download or to view this specific DSD, which will enable me to model my data, the one that I have to send to Eurostat. And then I have two possibilities. Either I connect my database using the SDMX reference infrastructure to expose it in order to be able to be pulled by Eurostat, or I just work with my file and manually I send it using the SDMX converter via the push. So we have the pull and the push, what we mentioned earlier. So this is just like to recap what we've been talking so far. So we will have an SDMX DSD, which enables to model my data, the data that is requested by Eurostat. The DSD will be stored, for Eurostat, it will be stored in the Euro SDMX registry. The exchange of this data, so the way that I will provide this data to Eurostat can be done by push, meaning I will use the SDMX converter, or Eurostat can pull it if I set up my database in a way that I open it up using the reference infrastructure. The hub, as we say, is a specific case of the pull mode, which is used for the census. Then we mentioned within the 3 pillars that one of the main pillars is actually the development of guidelines and the agreement of concept definitions. So those are done by the statistical working group, and those enable us to exchange data and metadata more efficiently, because if we share, it's not enough to have the infrastructure to exchange the data or the metadata, but of course it makes things easier if we don't have to translate that data into a different or to make like to harmonize later on, because if we have already agreed the definitions, that will enable the exchange, no further analysis afterwards. And then we have VTL, the validation and transformation language, which is currently being developed in Eurostat to validate the data. So that's about it in terms of the overall understanding of where SDMX